Happy Tuesday, class. This is Mrs. Barber, and we are in our fantastic research and critical thinking class. Today, we're going to continue our discussion. Don't forget that my email that I'd like for you to use to send work is c.barberc@pcsb.org, or you can just share your work with me in Google Classroom and it will pop up in cbarber@athenianacademy.org. So yesterday we were talking about reasoning, identifying problems, analyzing the situation, reflecting on possible solutions to the problem, and then evaluating the outcome of what you've done to solve the problem. And we use the example of my classroom and those pods that you could see needed to be made so that we could social distance safely in my room, and then how we had to deconstruct what we saw through only pictures and come up with a usable prototype. Okay. So the whole reason that we needed those wonderful barriers that you're not going to touch if you're here face to face is because of the pandemic, the coronavirus 19 pandemic. So our critical thinking today is on when is a pandemic over with. We're going to watch a video that's entitled, "When is a pandemic over?" So let's go to our talk, our TED Talk, and let's find out when is a pandemic over.
Consider this unfortunately familiar scenario. Several months ago, a highly infectious, sometimes deadly, respiratory virus infected humans for the first time. It then proliferated faster than public health measures could contain it. Now, the World Health Organization has declared a pandemic, meaning that it's spreading worldwide. The death toll is starting to rise, and everyone is asking the same question: when will the pandemic end? The WHO will likely declare the pandemic over once the infection is mostly contained and rates of transmission drop significantly throughout the world. But exactly when that happens depends on what global governments choose to do next. They have three main options: race through it, delay and vaccinate, or coordinate and crush.
So I'd like to go back to the PowerPoint. I'd like for you to put the title, "When is a pandemic over?" So write that down with today's date. When is a pandemic over? And then I want you to put these three different ways in which making a pandemic obsolete. The first is to race through it. Jot that down. Number one, race through it. The second is to delay and vaccinate. And the third is to coordinate and crush. So jot those three ways down. These are the three ways that we have discovered you can end a pandemic.
One is widely considered best, and it may not be the one you think. In the first, governments and communities do nothing to halt the spread and instead allow people to be exposed as quickly as possible. Without time to study the virus, doctors know little about how to save their patients, and hospitals reach peak capacity almost immediately. Somewhere in the range of millions to hundreds of millions of people die, either from the virus or the collapse of healthcare systems. Soon, the majority of people have been infected and either perished or survived by building up their immune responses. Around this point, herd immunity kicks in, where the virus can no longer find new hosts, so the pandemic fizzles out a short time after it began. But there's another way to create herd immunity without such a high cost of life. Let's reset the clock to the moment the WHO declared the pandemic. This time, governments and communities around the world slow the spread of the virus to give research facilities time to produce a vaccine. They buy this crucial time through tactics that may include widespread testing to identify carriers, quarantining the infected and people they've interacted with, and physical distancing. Even with these measures in place, the virus slowly spreads, causing up to hundreds of thousands of deaths. Some cities get the outbreak under control and go back to business as usual, only to have a resurgence and return to physical distancing when a new case passes through. Within the next several years, one or possibly several vaccines become widely and hopefully freely available thanks to a worldwide effort. Once 40 to 90% of the population has received it, the precise amount varying based on the virus, herd immunity kicks in, and the pandemic fizzles out. Let's rewind the clock one more time to consider the final strategy: coordinate and crush. The idea here is to simultaneously starve the virus everywhere through a combination of quarantine, social distancing, and restricting travel. The critical factor is to synchronize responses. In a typical pandemic, when one country is peaking, another may be getting its first cases. Instead of every leader responding to what's happening in their jurisdiction, here everyone must treat the world as the giant interconnected system it is. If coordinated properly, this could end a pandemic in just a few months, with low loss of life. But unless the virus is completely eradicated, which is highly unlikely, there will be risks of it escalating to pandemic levels once again. And factors like animals carrying and transmitting the virus might undermine our best efforts altogether. So which strategy is best for this deadly infectious respiratory virus? Racing through it is a quick fix, but would be a global catastrophe and may not work at all if people can be reinfected. Crushing the virus through coordination alone is also enticing for its speed, but only reliable with true and nearly impossible global cooperation. That's why vaccination, assisted by as much global coordination as possible, is generally considered to be the winner. It's the slow, steady, and proven option in the race. Even if the pandemic officially ends before a vaccine is ready, the virus may reappear seasonally, so vaccines will continue to protect people. And although it may take years to create, disruptions to most people's lives won't necessarily last the full duration. Breakthroughs in treatment and prevention of symptoms can make viruses much less dangerous, and therefore require less extreme containment measures. Take heart, the pandemic will end. Its legacy will be long-lasting, but not all bad. The breakthroughs, social services, and systems we develop can be used to the betterment of everyone. And if we take inspiration from the successes and lessons from the failures, we can keep the next potential pandemic so contained that our children's children won't even know its name. Humanity has conquered deadly plagues before. The smallpox virus killed 300 million people in the 20th century alone, but has since been eradicated. Find out how with this video.
Okay, so I want you to think about, analyze, reflect on what you saw, and evaluate which of the three strategies do you think is the best one for our community? Which of the three do you think is the best one for our community? So what you're going to do is, on a sheet of loose leaf paper, 35 words minimum, proper heading, which is your name, date, and title. When is the pandemic over? And spelling and punctuation and grammar all count. Give me your well thought out opinion as to which strategy would be the best one for our community right now. So I'm going to pause the video here and allow you some time to write. If you are at home, I'd prefer that you type it in your Google Docs and that you share it with me and you turn it in to where the assignment is due in Google Classroom. I think you'll find that much easier. So 35 words, but if you do more, you'll possibly earn extra credit, which never hurts. Which of those three strategies do you think is the best one for our community? Okay, we'll pause here. Okay, so you've used some critical thinking skills. You recall that critical thinking is a manner of thinking that employs curiosity, creativity, skepticism, analysis, and logic. Okay, so you're going to use all of those things to come up with your opinion. So I'm going to pause the video here and I'm going to listen to a few of you and your opinions. Okay, thank you for sharing your thoughts and ideas. So, critical thinking, how we conquered the deadly smallpox virus. So you should have your spiral out. If not, make sure you take it out. And make sure you put today's date and the title, How We Conquered the Deadly Smallpox Virus. And we're going to watch this video. It also happens to be on TED Ed. Ugh. Look at that, smallpox.
10,000 years ago, a deadly virus arose in northeastern Africa. The virus spread through the air, attacking the skin cells, bone marrow, spleen, and lymph nodes of its victims. The unlucky infected developed fevers, vomiting, and rashes. 30% of infected people died during the second week of infection. Survivors bore scars and scabs for the rest of their lives. Smallpox had arrived. In 1350 BC, the first smallpox epidemics hit during the Egypt-Hittite War. Egyptian prisoners spread smallpox to the Hittites, which killed their king and devastated his civilization. Insidiously, smallpox made its way around the world via Egyptian merchants, then through the Arab world with the Crusades, and all the way to the Americas with the Spanish and Portuguese conquests. Since then, it has killed billions of people, with an estimated 300 to 500 million people killed in the 20th century alone. But smallpox is not unbeatable. In fact, the fall of smallpox started long before modern medicine. It began all the way back in 1022 AD. According to a small book called The Correct Treatment of Smallpox, a Buddhist nun living in a famous mountain named Ome Shan in the southern province of Sichuan would grind up smallpox scabs and blow the powder into nostrils of healthy people. She did this after noticing that those who managed to survive smallpox never got it again, and her odd treatment worked. The procedure, called variolation, slowly evolved, and by the 1700s, doctors were taking material from sores and putting them into healthy people through 4 or 5 scratches on the arm. This worked pretty well, as inoculated people would not get reinfected, but it wasn't foolproof. Up to 3% of people would still die after being exposed to the pus. It wasn't until English physician Edward Jenner noticed something interesting about dairymaids that we got our modern solution. At age 13, while Jenner was apprenticed to a country surgeon and apothecary in Sodbury, near Bristol, he heard a dairymaid say, "I shall never have smallpox, for I have had cowpox. I shall never have an ugly pockmarked face." Cowpox is a skin disease that resembles smallpox and infects cows. Later on, as a physician, he realized that she was right. Women who got cowpox didn't develop the deadly smallpox. Smallpox and cowpox viruses are from the same family, but when a virus infects an unfamiliar host, in this case cowpox infecting a human, it is less virulent. So Jenner decided to test whether the cowpox virus could be used to protect against smallpox. In May 1796, Jenner found a young dairymaid, Sarah Nelms, who had fresh cowpox lesions on her hand and arm, caught from the udders of a cow named Blossom. Using matter from her pustules, he inoculated James Phipps, the 8-year-old son of his gardener. After a few days of fever and discomfort, the boy seemed to recover. 2 months later, Jenner inoculated the boy again, this time with matter from a fresh smallpox lesion. No disease developed, and Jenner concluded that protection was complete. His plan had worked. Jenner later used the cowpox virus in several other people and challenged them repeatedly with smallpox, proving that they were immune to the disease. With this procedure, Jenner invented the smallpox vaccination. Unlike variolation, which used actual smallpox virus to try to protect people, vaccination used the far less dangerous cowpox virus. The medical establishment, cautious then as now, deliberated at length over his findings before accepting them. But eventually, vaccination was gradually accepted, and variolation became prohibited in England in 1840. After large vaccination campaigns throughout the 19th and 20th centuries, the World Health Organization certified smallpox's eradication in 1979. Jenner is forever remembered as the father of immunology. But let's not forget the dairymaid Sarah Nelms, Blossom the cow, and James Phipps, all heroes in this great adventure of vaccination, who helped eradicate smallpox.
Another fascinating video that explained to us how we conquered smallpox. All right, so here you're going to write number 2. If you recall, number 1 was quarantine. And now you're going to write vaccination. 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 And you're going to write down its definition. So here's the definition I'd like you to use. Okay? Vaccination, also known as immunization, is a way to trigger your immune system and prevent serious, life-threatening diseases. So you're going to write the first definition. Vaccination, also known as immunization, is a way to trigger your immune system and prevent serious, life-threatening diseases. It's amazing that vaccines can prevent us getting sick with these pathogens. And here's the man that we owe it all to. I want you to put down Edward Jenner. Edward Jenner. He got rid of or eradicated, but you can put got rid of, smallpox. And here's a quote from him. Look at the quote while I read it. "I hope that someday the practice of producing cowpox in human beings will spread all over the world. When that day comes, there will be no more smallpox. What a great thought. And just think, it started with this one man and something he observed that his curiosity allowed him to ponder. So we have to hope that possibly there's going to be a solution that will end our pandemic. Okay, make sure your notes are neat. Go ahead and close up your belongings. And we are ending here for today.